let's talk about what food to store where and the importance of storing food separately. Now, when it comes to cold storage, you do need to remember that temperature is important, right? We want a cool temperature, but not frozen. Preferably below 10 degrees is great. Like that 3 to 5 degree Celsius range is perfect. And then you also need to understand humidity levels. That certain foods like a higher humidity than others. And then certain foods don't like to be with other foods. Now, that seems really overwhelming, but it actually isn't. And I'm going to give you 3 tips, 3 things to remember when storing your food, all right? So the first one is going to be, do not store your fruits and vegetables together, okay? So number 1, do not store fruits and vegetables together. When you're storing fruit, if you're storing fruit long-term, there's only a certain number of fruits that you can store long-term, and that's just apples, basically. And winter pears, at least in our region, that's what I have available to me that can store long-term. So for me, I'm not going to be storing any of my apples and pears with anything else. That's why I like to store my apples and pears in my freezer root cellar, totally separate from anything else. And the reason is because they give off ethylene gas, and that gas will ripen other vegetables. And so, if you want your tomatoes to ripen more quickly, you can throw an apple in the box with them. But generally speaking, you don't want your fruits or your vegetables to ripen anymore or to go rotten. So if you keep your apples away from your vegetables, that is a huge win. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that some vegetables and fruits need a higher humidity. And so that's where the apples need to be stored separately, and they need a high humidity. And that's why the trench storage method and the root cellar method work really, really well. Or the second refrigerator works well too. Just not quite, the humidity level isn't quite right in the refrigerator. So the apples need a high humidity, and they need to be stored separately. So that can go into our outdoor cellar situation. And then root vegetables also need to be stored at a high humidity, so the humidity for the apples and the root vegetables are the same, but they can't be stored together. And so that's a little bit tricky, but it doesn't have to be. And that's why the in-ground storage situation for the carrots and the beets and the parsnips works really well, because they're just in the spot that they grew, and the humidity there is perfect. So that's why I love my in-ground storage for my root vegetables. And then of course you can also do in-ground in bins in the trench, right? And the trench method is great because you can have apples at one end and root vegetables at another, and you can put maybe a bale of hay or a bag of leaves in between, and they're not going to bother each other. So number 1 is don't store your fruits with your vegetables. Number 2, certain ones need high humidity, like apples and root vegetables. And number 3, everything else stores in the cold storage. That's it. So really, those are the only things that you have to remember. So everything else, from the potatoes to the squashes, I keep, everything else in the cold storage. All my jars, all my canning, I keep in my cold storage. This is just for show, to look a little fancy. I don't actually store them in the light like this. I store them in my cold storage in a dark, cool space. They last longer that way. And so that's really it. When you look at the graphs and you look at all the information, it can get overwhelming. But in reality, you simply need to remember the humidity level, remember that fruit can't go together with vegetables, and that everything else just does store quite happily in a cold storage. As long as it doesn't freeze, you're going to be good to go. So it's pretty straightforward. Let's get on to the next section.